Well, it seemed like tonight would never get here, but finally, the cold front is pushed to the coast. The last of the showers and thunderstorms are moving out, and we can put an end to this historic and catastrophic weekend for some areas like Connecticut and Long Island. We'll talk about that and show you some pictures and look ahead to some mid September weather for the next several days. And that's all up front tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And here we are for the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, I these historic events are happening all too often. Just as a starter here, uh, this one truly, we talk about the fact that whenever we deal with these summertime thunderstorm situations, that anytime you look at rainfall forecasts, you have to at least double for what could happen locally. Sometimes it's triple. In this case, it was probably quintuple the rainfall amounts. But I mean, truly, looking at some of the pictures, and Dennis Cassia, thank you, Joe McNeil's, thank you. Um, I've got some of the pictures that he took today in Connecticut, and I've got a couple of Long Island shots along the way too. I mean, it looked like a war zone, Joe. It was just like a war zone.
Water can do so much damage, and especially water that is flowing at a tremendous rate of speed in the aftermath of rainfall amounts that, at times yesterday, Joe, in parts of Fairfield County, Connecticut, Long Island, and also in portions of north central New Jersey, rain was coming down at the rate of 3 to 4 inches per hour. We sometimes talk about rain, coming down at the rate of a half to 1 inch an hour or 1 to 2 inches an hour. We're talking about 3 to 4 inches an hour. And when it comes down that hard, that fast, the word certainly is catastrophic, and that is exactly what took place yesterday and last evening across parts of the tri-state area. And amazingly, for example, where Dennis Cassia is, he probably received about 10 inches of rain. Here in Putnam Valley, my problem was power outages. That's why I was not on the show last night. But I actually got away with just under 2 inches of rain, which normally is a pretty hefty amount in one sitting. But when you compare 2 to 10, I mean, there's no comparison whatsoever.
Just looking at some of these Long Island numbers here. So I was definitely another one of these North Shore events. If you were north of the LIE, you got much more than what they got south of the LIE. And even south of the LIE, some of the numbers were not shabby rainfall amounts normally, 2 to 4 inches or so, maybe some 5 inch amounts here and there. But then start to go north, and I mean, you're seeing 10.18 in Sound Beach. That's the highest that the Weather Service is reporting. That doesn't count anything that's fallen today, by the way. Miller Place 9.84. I lived up in this area for a couple of years before I came down to Georgia, and this was mind-boggling to me, just in terms of uh, with some of the pictures of the flooding in Connecticut. We had I'm looking at actually before we even get to Connecticut and North Jersey, it was mostly 3 to 4 inch rain amounts, which again, those are impressive enough. A
Four
couple
inches,
of
4 inches is just about an entire month's worth of rain.
right,
Yeah.
and then you go into Connecticut. Now I'm just looking here. Bridgeport on the coast, 2.75. Okay. Greenwich 3.53, Stamford 4.10. And then you start going further north. Darien 6.42, uh, Stamford, Connecticut 6.5, Bethel 6.77, uh, another one from Stamford at 6.87. Then further going higher, New Canaan 7.61, Reading Ridge 9.22, Monroe 9.98, Shelton 9.99, Again, that doesn't count whatever's fallen today. Newtown, 10 inches even, and that was as of 3:40 p.m. this afternoon. No, I'm sorry, that was as of 3:40 p.m. yesterday, and Sandy Hook 12.17. There must be some locals that got like between 12 and 18. Uh, judging from what some of the Doppler estimates that I looked at. And this is Joe. I'm going to bring this up. This is Harbor Road in Stony Brook, and I mean I've been on this road,
Wow.
and
Look at that.
it's just crazy. The and the the road actually collapses while this video is running. So I'm going to let it play through. You're going to see more of the road collapse. But look at the water just literally pouring in, like a like a dam just broke.
Yeah.
Look at that. I mean,
I think
that's just. I mean, I'm chuckling more from just being astonished by this more than anything else.
you really cannot gauge again how powerful or how potent water
Now
flows so rapidly.
there's the pieces of the road,
Look at that.
and
Look
there's
at that.
another piece that goes,
Unbelievable. Oh, oh,
and there's another piece that goes.
ah!
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Holy mackerel.
Now let me close this. Let me just bring us back on the screen here really quick. Whoops. There we go. And let's go to Dennis Cassius pictures here. Got a whole bunch. These again were taken by Joe McNeils. Thank you, Joe, for this. And this is just a shot from outside the windshield. I mean, look at that. It's like a whole river is going with a house in it. I mean, that's really what it looks like. Um, Here's another shot. I guess that's a railroad uh, crossing there, and it's all flooded out underneath. And I mean, I can't even imagine being a homeowner having to deal with this. Uh, you've got, you got to be numb if this is your house.
Especially if you don't have flood insurance.
Oh, yeah, and I've always advocated, having lived in New Orleans, where it was mandatory to have flood insurance. It doesn't cost very much, especially if you don't live in a flood-prone area. So just to the peace of mind, because standard homeowners insurance does not pay for this. Okay.
Right.
Uh, there's some shots of the Norwalk fire rescue. There were I think two lives were lost. Um, at least that's the count so far. Here's another shot, Joe, where uh, the road is just gone. And look at that mess. I mean, that's going to take weeks to clean up.
I mean, how ironic is this? We're looking at all of this, the results of what happened over the weekend, over Sunday, and yet all through last week, we were talking about the fact that our friend Ernesto was going to stay well offshore. We kept assuring people, don't worry, there's not going to be any direct hit from Ernesto. You needn't worry, aside for some, swelling and some rough seas offshore, but don't worry about any kind of major catastrophe. And yet, this event yesterday had nothing to do with Ernesto. By the way, I think it was Tom Contino, I'm backing up on the chat board here, said that somebody, I think in Brookhaven town, in doing the assessment, doing the the presser or the press conference in the aftermath of what hit Suffolk County, made the comment that this was due to the remnants. Ed,
Oh,
Ed Romaine. He said Ed Romaine is blaming it on Ernesto. I don't know what the man is thinking, but I am an but I am an Ed Romaine fan. Well, There you
Well,
go. Weather.
well, we know what happened here because we've been saying this. We certainly, uh, last night on the show, Ernesto being out where it was at 65, 65 west or that vicinity they're in, and moving slowly northward, was preventing the normal west to east progression of these troughs that were moving through uh, southern Canada and the northern portion of the United States, especially when they got to the East Coast. There was no place for that trough to go. And when you looked at the loop, the trough was there. You could see the rotation, but there was no movement eastward. So you had these spokes that just kept rotating round and around and around. And as each one went by, one Saturday night into Sunday morning, and then you had all the thunderstorms and the severe weather that developed with yeah, the daytime heating inside that really rich tropical air mass that was along the East Coast. You had a southeast flow. You had a low developing in upstate New York on the cold front, which caused, you started to see what was going on early Sunday afternoon. You had all these pressure falls going on, and not small ones either, in New Jersey and over Long Island and points and Connecticut and points south. And I mean, that was the telltale sign that something, big was happening here. And I mean, look at this. It's just gone. Half the yard is just just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about the angle of this shot.
Somebody on the chat, Steve Lapointe, saying, "How can anybody blame it on Ernesto when it was way out in the Atlantic?" Well, actually, what Joe just described, let's use the what I would call the railroad crossing analogy here. Pretend that Ernesto was a railroad train, a train on the tracks, traveling along. You're, on the other hand, in your car heading for the railroad crossing. You're expecting to freely go across the railroad crossing and continue on your trek. But all of a sudden, here come the gates. The gates come down, you're stopped, and now you have to wait for this slow moving freight train to move on by. And while the freight train is moving and you're stuck in that position, as Joe mentioned, the atmosphere was exceedingly humid, very rich for the type of precipitation that fell. You're stuck there, and so you're being subjected over and over and over again to developing showers and thunderstorms until finally it just piles up to 8, 9, 10, 12 inches of rain. And then finally, as we saw today, the train, Ernesto, finally has moved out of the way. Yeah, you may have been on the line of cars that was maybe about a quarter of a mile away from the crossing, but you're still being affected because you're stopped, you're stuck, you can't go anywhere. But now finally, Ernesto has moved on by past Newfoundland. The gates this morning finally started coming up and everything started to move again, slowly but surely. One final flourish of showers and storms this afternoon in places. NOAA, by the way, the Storm Prediction Center, Joe, put out a mesoscale discussion this afternoon indicating that they were not planning to put any kind of thunderstorm watch up. There was only about a 5% chance of that. And the reason that they pointed out that they weren't doing it is that they didn't think that there'd be anything organized. No squall line, no multi clusters of storms like we may have seen, in cases yesterday. There was no need for any of that. So they just simply said, I translated on my Facebook page because I was thinking about putting the actual discussion on my Facebook page, and I said, this is probably too complicated for the average bear to
Yeah.
understand. So what I simply said was, they're around. There are heavy downpours here and there, hit or miss. You're either going to get hit or you're going to miss out. Poor Dennis, I feel so sorry for him. He got underneath another one of these locally heavy storms this afternoon in the aftermath of what happened yesterday and last night. Meanwhile, for me, in Putnam Valley, there was a really nasty thunderstorm which passed literally just to my south. I heard the roaring thunder, looked outside, had some rain, a little bit of rain, enough to moisten the ground, but that was it. I don't know what I would have received if I was directly underneath that storm, probably passed like 5 or 8 miles south of where I was, but I didn't get it. But again, unfortunately, Dennis got another round of heavy showers and storms this afternoon. So it was a matter of, again, today being hit or miss. And now it looks like this is it. The showers and storms are now moving out. And it looks like right now, the weather from now right on through the end of the week and into the weekend looks absolutely glorious, except for one fly in the ointment. And I guess we'll get to that in a moment.
Wednesday.
But other than that, it looks fabulous.
Well, just to show you that what the upper air looked like in review, and in terms of what happened. So, this here's Ernesto. Okay, there's an upper low that was sitting off of Nova Scotia, and then you had this upper low and trough in the Western Great Lakes. Now, if Ernesto had been picked up by this upper trough over Nova Scotia, it would have gone up and out. And that would have allowed this system to just kind of march right along. We would have gotten some showers and storms, but they would have moved. They would not have sat in one spot. Uh, However, what happens? That first trough pulls Ernesto northward, but it's already the northern trough, the first one, is now south of Newfoundland. Ernesto's over Bermuda. Okay, so it missed that trough to get kicked out to the east. The second trough now can't move until this thing gets out, until Ernesto gets out of the way. So the second trough, this is Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. Okay, so the trough axis Saturday evening runs from Michigan down to about Alabama, and we're starting to get into that southwest flow aloft. You start to get showers and thunderstorms. A little warm front goes by, and of course you saw the Sunday morning when you woke up and saw the radar. There was this big, huge blob of red sitting in southwestern Connecticut and not moving. Well, as we progress during the day, that trough didn't really make very much eastward progress. It kind of inched eastward, uh, maybe from western Ohio to eastern Ohio by the time we got to Sunday afternoon and evening. And the other thing that happened, Joe, is that trough kind of sharpened up a little bit. And it's now we're finally, Ernesto's southeast of Nova Scotia going toward Newfoundland. Finally, there's a shortwave that's dropping down up in eastern Canada that's taking this trough and kicking it out to the east. Uh, Ernesto out of the way, everything starts to move again. It was a very we've seen this over the course of the last number of years where models show storms move out and cold fronts that approach, and you think it's going to come through, but then the front gets delayed for a couple of days because the storm didn't move out, and you had to sit there and wait for it until it happened. Now, some of those other cases, I guess in all of those other cases that I can recall in my mind, I can't really think of any specific one, but it did not result in a foot and a half of rainfall. Wherever the trough was in position to wherever the offshore system was, we weren't in the line of fire. In this particular case, we were definitely in the line of fire. I mean, it was just you know, it was a setup. And you know, the other thing is, a few people were kind of asking, well, how come there were flood watches up, but oddly enough, the flood watches were not up. They didn't have flood watches up for Long Island. They didn't have flood watches up for Connecticut. And I noticed that WPC was playing catch up yesterday because at some point they stuck in a moderate risk for flash flooding, which they didn't have before. And I think at that point it was sort of like, well, you know what, you might as well have gone all whole hog and went to the high risk because we were already past that. I just think there was one of these cases here, Joe, that uh, you could kind of generally give an idea. We sort of knew that this was going to take a while to get through, but uh, when we got into the short range, you could see what was happening. So, sometimes basically you're going to have to update forecasts on the fly. That's just how it is. I just don't know in hindsight whether somebody's going to kind of go back to last week and you were looking at what models were doing and thinking, okay, let me forecast 12 to 18 inches of rain
Ah,
over half of the state of Connecticut and for Long Island, but not for everybody else. I mean, I just don't know anybody that would be good in, that is uh, uh, has that the expertise and the experience to have said that. I don't know. Maybe I'm not looking at this the way I should, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
no,
Some
my son brought my grandson over for a visit yesterday. My daughter-in-law actually drove to Long Island to meet with a friend, and so my son came with my grandson. And at one point, it was pouring to beat the band. I mean, it was coming down hard and heavy. I looked at the radar and I kept assuring everybody at the house here, my daughter, my son, my wife. I said, we're on the back edge. The back edge is edging slowly to the northeast toward Connecticut, and we should be out of this within about a half an hour. It actually was more like an hour, but I didn't realize the fact that if things had been just a little bit different, that back edge never would have moved, and I could have very well have been in the same situation that Dennis Cassia was in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where they got again 8, 9, 10, 12 inches of rain. Meanwhile, as I said, after that initial burst of rainfall yesterday in the late morning and midday, we picked up about an inch and a half from that. And then we picked up about another half inch more from more showers and storms that passed on by late last night. By the way, I mean, you can picture Joe, Renata, and I outside in the pouring rain trying to set up the generator. As you know, our power went out yesterday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. About six, she said, "So what are we going to do?" They expected to bring the power back up at our house at about 7:45. I said, why don't we just go out to eat? And so we went to the diner, and as we're eating our dinner, the waitress who lives in Putnam Valley where we are said, "My husband just called and said the power is back." Renata called up our house, and the answering machine answered and said, "Hey, we got electricity. We're back too." And so we finished our meal. We came back on the roadway to our house and found all of a sudden that we're being diverted. All kinds of orange and blue lights here and there. Sheriff and troopers going this way and that way. I said, what the hell's happening here? What's going on? Well, we found out what was going on because when we got home, the power was off again. Apparently something happened. So the power was on, then the power was off. Now it's coming past 8:30. And so I said, so what are we going to do? And so she said, we might as well roll the generator out. We had to open the garage, pull out the generator. We had to plug it in. And all of this is happening as the rain is coming down steadily. And after we got everything all hooked up and after the electricity is on from the generator, we came back inside and she notices on her laptop that she has internet. And I'm not going to say her name because it's right next to me and she'll light up when I mention her name. But we said, we asked her, I said, is there internet? She said, yes, there is internet. I said, that's not supposed to happen. When we're on generator power, the generator will light the lights and turn on the heating and everything else, but it doesn't do anything for the internet because the cables and wires are outside of our house. But yet they were on. So I said, is it possible that after all of this harangue, after we had just hooked up the generator and started to get power again, that now the electricity came back for a second time? So we went back out. We disconnected the generator again in the rain. As soon as we disconnected it, the lights came back on again. So if we had just waited a little while longer, we wouldn't even have to take out the generator. We would have had our power back for a second time. But again, all of this was happening when we had that second surge of rain that hit us last night.
All right.
Brought our accumulation of rainfall to just 1/100th of an inch shy of 2 inches. So we got a big 2 inches, Dennis. Not as much as you had, what, 5 or 6 times more than we had, but still, between the electricity going out and then getting poured down on the rain, trying to bring the generator out and then back in again or whatever like that. What a night,
Yeah.
and that's why we weren't on with you last night, Joe.
Understood. Understood. Of course, with all of this, the climate change, global warming question comes up. And Bill Goodman posted something on his Facebook page. Bill Goodman of National Weather Service in Upton in New York. So he was in the thick of it with all of this. And he also lives near one of the, right near the where the max area of rain fell. Um, he says, I'll just quote him. He says, "Don't ask if yesterday's rain is attributable to global warming because off the top of my head, I don't know. My answer is, quote, maybe. Have to search for studies documenting frequency of extreme heavy rainfall events across the Northeast, and even these studies must take into account our vastly improved ability to observe and document them, which happens to parallel the increase in frequency in the chart. What he puts got some charts up there. But I'm not going to put the charts up. From the big chair, or from his big chair, I've seen extreme events like this before, just in different places. I remember one near Sparta, New Jersey in 2000 that dumped 14, maybe 14, and maybe up to 20 inches of rain per radar estimates. There was an event in 2011 where Western Long Island got hit hard with 10 inches plus. We had a big event in Islip 10 years ago in 2014, Islip 13.57, which is the New York State record for 24-hour rainfall. And then yesterday, all of them are what the thread that goes through all of these is all of them occurred in August. What makes yesterday really unique was that there were two distinct areas of extreme rainfall occurring at different times. When you have a nearby low pressure system bringing in Atlantic moisture on a strong southeast flow at this time of year, and anything from a sea breeze to a frontal boundary to hills and mountains to lift that incoming air mass to wring out that moisture, bad things can happen. And you know, I'll certainly go along with that. And by the way, I will now. I'm going to put up this chart because I just looked at it. And I think it's certainly relevant in terms of. And thank you, Bill Goodman, for this. But here, this chart is a chart of the frequency of these extreme events, and it goes through 2016. And I mean, you can definitely see that there is after going basically sideways, all right, from 1910 to about 1980, suddenly, and then after 1980, we start seeing an uptrend with higher highs and higher lows. So, definitely uh, the extreme one. This is across the whole United States, by the way. So there's definitely been an uptrend in these events after going 70 years where it just was pretty static. That
You know
suddenly it
what,
just
Joe?
shoots up.
The interesting thing I find from this graph is that it is not a curve that is just continually going up. Notice, if you will, that it's like a sine wave. It's going up and down, up and down. So there are periods when, yeah, there's a maxima, so to speak, of precipitation, but then it goes down and then it goes back up again. But each time it goes back up, the maxima is a little bit higher than the previous maxima. So
Right.
that
Yeah. So you have higher highs and higher lows.
right. So it's cyclical.
Well, there's probably some cyclicality in it. All through this, it looks like you would see there is some sort of cyclicality, but now you've got cyclicality in an uptrend.
Right.
So, if this was a stock market chart, you want to buy these lows and then sell the peaks. Okay. And apparently we're on another, peak.
I want to stress here that we should be, it looks like so clearly that we're going to continue ad nauseum to see this go up, up, up as the decades ahead of us go. However, I do want to point out that in regards to sunspot activity, there was a paper that was done back in the early part of this century by some Russian scientists. I know one of the scientists' name was Zargova, and he was pointing out, or he and his team, Zargova et al. He was saying, over the last 30 or 40 years, each time we've had a sunspot maximum cycle, it's been lower than the previous cycle. The cycle of sunspots is roughly every 11 years the sunspots peak. They're peaking right now. But he pointed out earlier in this century, and he was doing this sheerly by extrapolation. He says, look how much each sunspot cycle, the amount of sunspot activity is going down with each cycle. And so he simply extrapolated and said, if this continues unabated, then by the time we get to the 2030s, there won't be any sunspots or hardly ever any sunspots. And he was trying to correlate that with the fact that with low sunspot numbers, that the temperatures in the northern hemisphere of the Earth get colder. There was something called the Maunder minimum back in the.
Right. Well, that's not happening.
That's not happening because while it looked great 20, 30 years ago that we were going down with each sunspot peak, this sunspot peak that we're into right now, this is some of the greatest numbers of sunspots and flares that we've seen in 30 years. It completely blows that paper, that very scholarly paper, to smithereens. So what looked so obvious, back, 20 years ago, oh, the sunspots are declining, and they're going to keep on declining through the rest of it didn't happen. So when you show that diagram of the cycles of how, over the years, the amount of rainfall or the extreme rainfall totals are going up with each new cycle, and you say, so, oh, that's going to continue for, yeah, maybe it might very well be, but then who's to say that something suddenly causes it to stop and all of a sudden it starts going back down again? I don't think, and I say this to people, I said, I don't know.
Obviously, there's other things going on. It's not
There's
just the
other
sunspots.
things. We don't know it all. We like to think that we know it
No,
all.
we don't.
Nor
I
do
was having this conversation with a friend of mine, just a couple of days ago. For as much as we know about all sorts of things, for as much as we know, uh, compared to what they knew 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, for as much as we know, there is so much. It's minuscule, the amount we know. There is
yeah,
so much we don't know. And we
exactly.
and we may not know, in our lifetimes for sure. And we may never know all there is to know. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you kind of, when someone, just as this illustration, when someone who takes a position as an atheist that says there is no, there is no God. Okay. Um, my response to that is, you can't say that. Okay. What you can say is, based on what we know, what I know today, based on the science, based on any all sorts of factors, but based on what you know today, you've come to that conclusion, and I think it's a valid conclusion to come to. You can look at something and say, okay, well, these are the facts in front of me. So based on these facts, that are on the table, this is my conclusion. But you can't say unequivocally, because you don't know. There is stuff you still don't know. Or, for example, if in the 1600s you said that the day will come where machines would be flying in the air, and that you'd be, on a device where you will be doing all the computations for you and everything else, they'd have burned you at the stake.
Right.
So, it's
Well,
we
somebody in the chat board referred to us as two grizzled veterans, but I don't really think we're grizzled that much yet. But I will. I
I,
will.
I'm grizzly,
I'm
but I'm not grizzled.
going to quote
Uh,
two people who are even more grizzled than we are. Both of whom we've worked with. Or I've worked with both of them. You've worked with, I know, one of them. One of them is Norm Dvoskin. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, with all of the devastation that went on, and about the fact that there were forecasts all the way up to almost the time that Sandy had arrived that were still somewhat in doubt. After all of that, Norm made a comment on Facebook saying, "This proves that we're not, we think that that we know everything. It proves that we're not in charge of anything." in the aftermath of what happened on Sandy. And with Jim Witt, who we've had here on Joe and Joe, and I'll mention his name. Those of you who are in the Hudson Valley know Jim. I did a piece about 12 years ago on News 12 about climate change and global warming. And I asked Jim, I said, why is it that 40 years ago, very distinguished meteorologists and climatologists were saying that we were headed for an ice age? And in fact, on the cover, we showed the cover of Time magazine, a caricature of Archie Bunker in his infamous chair from All in the Family, but he was frozen to the chair and there were icicles hanging off of his cigar. That's how much everybody was thinking and talking about the fact that we were heading for an ice age back in the 1970s. And here, 12 years ago, it was obvious now everybody was talking about global warming and penguins on icebergs that are floating away with polar bears. And I asked Jim a simple question. I said, why is it that scholarly scientists and individuals said we were heading for an ice age 40 years ago, and now we're saying we're heading for global warming, that we're in global warming and climate change? And he said something that, Joe, I tell you, the residual effect, the blowback that I got from this one statement that he made on this report that I did for News 12 is unbelievable. People were actually clamoring to get me fired for horrible reporting. Jim said, when I asked him why is it that we thought that there was ice age and now that we're global warming, he looked straight into the camera and said, because they don't know, Joe. And I think all the Al Gore disciples out there, especially, were out to get me and to get Jim for making that comment. We really don't know, Joe.
Well,
And maybe Jim was right. Maybe it looks
well,
all
I don't. We don't know everything there
we
is to
don't
know. We
know.
don't.
Don't
Okay. We learn new things along the way and discover that they nullify stuff we thought was correct, and then that takes us down a different. That takes us down a different road, and then maybe something comes along and nullifies that. I mean, that's just science progresses that way. Unfortunately, as we know, it's all political, and of course, it's become political, and then most people will think that there's an absolute answer to everything. There can be no variability. You're not allowed to question. Uh, if people didn't question, we wouldn't learn anything. Uh, it's I'm sure someone's going to get hacked off by something that I said or you said or we both said tonight.
I did. I
Yeah,
did a talk. I did a talk on climate change and global warming, and I mentioned in one case about the carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere, and that the amount of carbon dioxide now, apparently due to man-made pollutants, have gone up as the highest levels in over 125,000 years. That we've never seen anything like this in centuries, millennia, whatever. And somebody raised their hand and said, "You say it's the greatest in 125,000 years?" I said, "That's correct." He says, "Well, what caused the high amount of CO2 in the atmosphere back then?" He said, "Was it global warming or whatever?" And I had no answer for him. I don't understand. I don't know why it was so high way back then, and then apparently for whatever reason it came down. Now it's
right.
back up again.
And by the way, we are talking about a very, very small amount. I mean, a trace amount. Carbon dioxide is a very, very small amount of the composition of the atmosphere, and it's higher by, it's higher by a minuscule amount. It's not like, it's quintupled 10 times or something like that. They're I'm not taking away from what they're trying to get in, find answers to questions, and and I applaud them for that. But there's things that I don't understand, and I think we should all have the right to ask questions about things we don't understand. I mean, if someone feels comfortable, now speaking on both sides here, if you feel comfortable accepting facts that are late, someone tells you something and you believe it, and you believe it because your mindset, your political mindset tells you you have to believe it, and you're not open to any, not open to seeing the other side of the other side of the argument. That's when you have a problem.
Right.
That's when you start dealing with absolutists who don't want to hear you. Okay, and you're, oh my God, you're questioning. What you're doing is you're questioning orthodoxy here. You're blaspheming. It's you're blaspheming. So anyhow, none of this is going to get solved tonight. But it was a nice, healthy discussion, I will say. And by the way, most importantly to all of this is Johnny Quest is back on the chat board tonight. We are so happy he is back. He's been taking care of his dad, and his dad is doing better. And we're glad you're back, and we're glad your dad is better, Johnny. And thank you for tossing some coin into the tip jar. Extremely generous of you. Thank you very much.
Right.
So, how about we look at what's going on weather-wise, since we're 40 minutes into this show already, and we haven't even looked at what's happening. So let's do that. And at least uh, we're not seeing, other than some leftover flood advisories, and we still have this. We'll check the radar in a second. But if you're west of New York City right now, you're getting the big whoosh. Joe, they're getting the big whoosh as the drier air is getting ready to come in. We do have heat advisories and excessive heat warnings continuing for Texas and for parts of northwest Louisiana. Temperatures in this area up into Oklahoma have been topping out between 100 and 110 for the last number of days, and it's going to go on for a little while longer. We have severe thunderstorm watches in eastern Colorado, western Nebraska, southeastern Wyoming, and for a good chunk of western Montana.
Do we have the maps up, Joe? Or
Yes, we do.
oh,
You might want to refresh your
I'm
YouTube.
gonna have to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So on the loop, the lightning strikes have peaked. Uh, they were very active about an hour or so ago, particularly in Virginia and into northeastern North Carolina. They're still going on there, but they've thinned out a bit. Also, a lot of lightning strikes in western New England down to Connecticut. Those are now starting to thin out and moving to the east. And we've got some scattered storms up in North Florida. Otherwise, the drier air, you'll notice these little dots of clouds from the Great Lakes to the southeast. It's all moving northwest to southeast. Uh, Dry air has gotten to me, so I'm thrilled. Going to be down in the 50s tonight. I can't wait for that. And here's what the radar looks like. Let me just quickly refresh. Looks like we've got a thunderstorm moving across coastal Connecticut east of New Haven and heading for New London. But the area has weakened quite a bit as it moves eastward. Also seeing some showers and a few storms up in northeastern Massachusetts, are also around the Boston area and extending up into New Hampshire. We've got a couple of flash flood warnings up in there's one in Vermont, and I think there's one here in New Hampshire that's ongoing, and then some rain and downpours along the border of Maine and Canada, and we've got showers up in the St. Lawrence Valley and also into north central New York State. Actually, there's also some serious flooding of some of the rivers in north central New York. Uh, this afternoon and evening. Seeing storms here in Delaware, down through eastern Virginia and eastern North Carolina on the radar. And then you look out in the west, you can see the activity in northeastern Colorado, lots of severe thunderstorm warnings there, where the watch is up, and also some warnings popping up into Montana. And that's where we've got the two watch boxes. You see them there. The marginal risk is mostly played out now here in the east. And I'll just put you up tomorrow's where, now we're going to be in that mid-September air that's coming in. So nothing to worry about in the east except for coastal Carolinas down to Georgia and Florida with some general thunderstorms possible. And up in the northwestern plains into Montana, where we've got a marginal risk of severe weather, no less than 2% tornado risk. And on day three, Now, this is the issue for Wednesday. We've got this upper low that's dropping down into upstate New York and New England. So there might be some low top scattered thunderstorms in upstate New York and northernmost Pennsylvania. I mentioned that there could be a shower, some scattered showers, widely scattered showers maybe Wednesday afternoon. Uh, but I also think it's going to be one of those days, Joe, where we're going to have self-destruct sunshine because the air aloft is going to be pretty cold.
Right, right. Well, I mentioned to Renata and also to my daughter, my son, my daughter. We want to have our annual get together on Wednesday at the Dutchess County Fair. If you're in the Hudson Valley, that is a big event. If you've ever been to county fairs before, except for maybe the one up in Syracuse, the New York State Fair, Dutchess County Fair offers a lot. Great food, rides, attractions, farm information. So we always go every year. And from way back, like a week ago, I was looking ahead and saying, "Well, it looks like Wednesday looks like it's going to be a good day." But now I had to tell them today. I said, we may have a problem on Wednesday. We may have to deal with some scattered showers. That's especially true if you live north of Interstate 84. I think the further north you go and west of 84, the better your odds of encountering at least a few showers. It might even be a shower, let's say, across Westchester. But the chances are, as you mentioned, Joe, self destruct sunshine, the day will probably start out beautifully, magnificently clear with deep blue sky and bright sunshine. But then, again, as that pool of unseasonably cool air, and my goodness, you're going to show the upper air in just a moment. I hope that there's an amazing cutoff over the Northeast on Wednesday,
Yes.
and that's going to induce all of that instability in that cool pool of air, which will lead to again some scattered after not yeah, maybe some low top convection way up north, up toward the Adirondacks or central New York. But I think on the edge, on the periphery, the fringe effects in parts of the Hudson Valley will be just a few scattered showers. So when I told that to the family today, they all said the same thing. Oh, well, if we go to the fair, we'll go first thing in the morning when there's still sunshine, and we'll, hightail it out of there as the clouds and the showers are moving in during the early and mid afternoon. But that's the kind of day it's going to be. And hey, temperatures on Wednesday in some spots, I
Not
think,
getting out of the 60s.
may not get out of the 60s. So you talk about September weather, that's it right there.
Yeah, and well, we're going to show the upper low in a second, but I just want to point out now because we're at the point where we can uh, take out the precip on the WPC 7-day forecast map. Now you see what's going on in Maine and upstate New York. Some of that is also they're going to get some stuff on Wednesday. But for southern New England and points south and west, you can see this pretty large area of either just a couple of hundredths and since this is effective as of 8 o'clock tonight, the couple of hundreds is probably coming from what's going on tonight. So we've got a pretty large area here where there's not going to be any precipitation for the next 7 days. The Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, down into the deep South, and away from the Gulf Coast. There's going to be very little in the way of precip for the next week. The stalling front is going to be off the southeast coast and through Florida, so that's where you're going to see where there could be several inches of rain or more in Florida, particularly central and south Florida. We've also got rain coming up into the southwest, a little monsoonal action going on there, and also up through the Rockies and the Wasatch, and on the order of anywhere from a few hundreds to some areas getting half to three-quarters of an inch, and some rain coming into the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, the here's the upper air. This is going back. The first map is Saturday, and this trough now moving into the east and going through. There's another short wave that's dropping down in eastern Canada from Labrador that forms a cutoff low, as Joe pointed out, that drops all the way down into New York State. This is,
Look at that.
I can remember times back in the 70s and in the early 80s where this sort of thing happened. Uh, and certainly in the last number of years, something like this, we really maybe have to wait till some point later in September or even October in some of the late summer extensions that we've had in the late 2010s and the early part of the 2020s. Although the last couple of years that has been less of a factor, but this is a really impressive upper low that's dropping down, and it's a cold, unstable atmosphere aloft with the sun heating up that air. You're going to get self-destruct clouds out of this, and then the upper low does pull out uh, by the time we get to Friday, and then we start to get into a bit of a ridge position that builds in late in the weekend and early next week. We're kind of on the edge of it. So the fact that, Joe, this next ridge kind of builds a little more to our west helps to keep the dew points down over the weekend. I mean, they're going to come up, but they're not going to fly up. You're not going to see them fly up above 70. You might get them eventually back by the time we get to Sunday and Monday. Maybe they'll be back into the low and mid 60s, but they're not going to go up to 70 or better.
Right.
At
Right.
least, at least through Monday, anyway.
A subtle trend back upward in the dew point or humidity department, but nothing that you can't hit. I mean, my goodness, take a look where that air is coming from by Monday. I mean, the upper flow is coming straight down from it looks like from where it was still on the forward side of the ridge, and the upper flow is bringing air down from near James Bay. So
Yeah, in
how
fact, the 12Z run actually has another cutoff low next Tuesday that forms off the Jersey coast for some odd reason. And then another trough that swings through eastern Canada. Uh, then a ridge starts to build back. This might be the one last gasp of summertime, as we said, toward the end of August and the very beginning of September, where we may get a little string of 90-degree weather.
Yeah, well, it's it's looking good, folks. If you decided that this was going to be the week that you took off from work, I can't say much about today, unfortunately, but tomorrow, improving weather. Wednesday, they may be a little fly in the ointment by the afternoon with a shower passing by, but then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even into the start of next week, looks absolutely grand. And boy, I tell you, after what we've been through this summer, between all the humidity and the spurts of heavy rain, we deserve it.
These are low temperatures, by the way, forecast on the Weather Service digital forecast map for Wednesday morning. And I'm trying to think back. It's been a long time since we've seen the metro areas, not the inland areas, but the metro areas, the big metro areas like New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington. It's been a long time since we've seen lows in the 50s during the month of August. But the digital forecast for Wednesday morning for New York City, for LaGuardia, has a low of 59. For Philadelphia, 56. For Boston, 57. 54 for Albany, but you got a lot of 40s in the Catskills in northeastern Pennsylvania. The 40s go down through western Virginia, even into western North Carolina. It's got 55 for me. I can hardly wait for that. And this is a really cool air mass. 40s back in Pennsylvania, and then believe Thursday morning, it's actually even a little bit cooler. 58 for, uh, wait, that's a 59 or a 58? 59. That's about the same. 57 for Philadelphia, 53 for Trenton. And you got these 40s up the Hudson Valley and up into New England. It's been a long time, Joe, since we've seen 50s for lows in the metro areas in the month of August.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. The record low temperature at Westchester County Airport for the 21st, that's Wednesday morning, is 48 degrees. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get down that
No,
low.
that seems a little bit of a reach.
That would be a bit of a reach because the airport, we say White Plains, but it's more like Harrison, and they tend to get the effect from Long Island Sound. But we're still, just the fact that we're considering that with these kind of temperatures tells you it's going to be cool. I think I'm actually going to be able to turn the air conditioner off. Hopefully
Yep.
first thing tomorrow.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this high coming down, it's a 1028-ish high. That's another thing. That's for this time of year. That's a very strong high pressure cell. And of course, again, on Wednesday with this upper low, we're probably going to see some instability. You can see the GFS generating a little bit of precip up in upstate New York and into interior New England and even into southeastern New England because it develops a little surface low there. So I think we'll probably again have a day from eastern PA to southern New England at the very least of self-destruct sunshine, and then Thursday and Friday look like two very nice days for much of the east. And by the way, this cool air, as you obvious, gets all the way down uh, into the south. I mean, just to widen this out a little bit. Um, I mean, forties get down to not too Wednesday morning, not that far from me and
Right.
you've got temperatures down in the low 60s. You know, the thing, Joe, in the South, when the first cold front comes through after this, after a long hot summer, it's like there's massive celebration. Everybody's cheering about the first cold front, and they're definitely cheering this because it's more than a 1 day wonder. And the other important thing about this is the fact that the dew points are going to be so low. Do you know who hates this? Who hates this weather, Joe? Sal Blandino. He's furious that this is happening. Um, anyway, these dew points get down to almost down to 40 in parts of West Virginia. Upper 40s and low 50s across much of New England, the Mid-Atlantic states. Up mid and upper 50s dew points going down. This is at 11 a.m. in the morning. But you got these low dew points going all the way down, 50 dew points into Alabama and Mississippi, almost down to but not quite down to the Gulf Coast. Almost there, but not quite there, down to the Gulf Coast. And I mean, I don't see the next important cold front is probably not a weather front. There's something that comes down Sunday night in that northwest flow with some showers in upstate New York and New England, and even have a little bit of shower activity near the coast. So that that little trough goes by, and then maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week we get a cold front to come on through. That seems to be that seems to be what the timing is going to be going forward.
And Keith Smolin, yes, I did get your pictures that you post on Facebook. He posted Joe some photos of towering cumulus clouds from his location, I guess, during this afternoon. Because I had said that again, showers and thunderstorms would be hit and miss, and I guess where he happened to be, he was in the miss category, but he was able to see uh, beyond where he was, the billowing or towering cumulus that was developing in places that were getting hit with some heavy duty rain and shower. I'm sure one of those was right over Dennis Cassia's house this afternoon.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Dennis.
Let's see. I don't think this. Oops. Let me just really quickly check. First of all, let me bring this back full screen. And let me just quickly check to see if the models did anything. I didn't notice anything earlier today as far as there's some more tropical waves coming out in the longer term, but the GFS anyway doesn't seem to be developing anything. Tried to have something in the islands in about 10 days or so, 10 or 12 days, and there's something in the Southwest Gulf, but who knows about that? And that's on the 18Z run. I'm just take a look quickly at the European. European starts showing tropical waves coming off the African coast in about 10 days. So, but it doesn't look like we see any showers or any tropical systems developing certainly over the next week.
And the way it was being promoted this particular summer, oh, there's going to be a tremendous number of tropical cyclones because of the La Nina and because of
Well,
the very.
it may still be, Joe. It just
I
they'll
understand. I understand that, but would you have taken a bet? Now we always say that on Labor Day there's always at least one tropical system, but from what we can see, at least on the long range, they may not necessarily be one. a week from actually that'd be 2 weeks from today, right? Labor Day is September 2nd. That's
Right.
two. That's 2 weeks from now. Yeah, 2 weeks from now. Do you think maybe that just there's a chance that we may not actually have anything 2 weeks from now if it remains as quiet as it is now? Um,
I'm just checking something here. Uh, past tracks. Uh, uh, let's go to. Oh, that only goes back to 2010. I wanted to just go back to last year because we had no tropical storms at all, no named storms during the month of August at all
yeah.
last year. So I'm just trying to. I seem to think though that last year it was like right after Labor Day that all of a sudden it just exploded. It was even quiet for the first few days of September. But I'm trying to find, why can't they make these things easy? Fast track seasonal maps.
Well, you know what, Joe? I went to Wikipedia, typed in 2023 Atlantic hurricane season,
I should have done the same.
and it says that there was a. I'm trying to see what is that. It says there was something on August. Well, wait a minute. See, now I got to go through all of these storms. There was a Hurricane Franklin last year, August 20th to September 1st.
I thought we went all of August last year. You looking at 23 or 22?
I'm looking at 23.
Uh, I thought we went the whole month of August last year without seeing a tropical cyclone.
Well, all I can tell you is there was a last year in 2023, there was Tropical Storm Gert from August 19th to September 4th. Tropical Storm Emily, August 20th and 21st, very short live system. Hurricane Franklin, August 20th to September 1st. And Tropical Storm Harold, August 21st to August 23rd. Hurricane Adalia, August 26th to August 31st. There seem to be quite a few. Maybe you're thinking of 2022.
Maybe it was 22. Hold on, let me see. Uh, I'm at,
Jose, August 29th to September 1st. Katia. Any of these names familiar to any of you people?
no. Okay, so 2022 had Fiona. Fiona was September 14th in 22. Earl, September 2nd. Danielle, September 1st.
I
Uh,
think you think of 2022, Joe. There doesn't appear to be any kind of
yeah, there was a potential tropical cyclone around the 19th of August, but it never, they never upgraded it.
right.
And Colin
July.
was on July 1st. So basically, once the calendar turned to September, we went to we had so we had Danielle was September 1st through the 8th. So we had 2 depressions, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 named storms that followed after that.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and there were 2 other tropical depressions that never did anything. And in fact, Hermine or Hermione, however you want it, however they. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Julia was October 7th. So there were actually 6 tropical cyclones that formed in the month of September.
But see, in spite of the fact that we didn't have anything, in August or whatever, we did have at least one tropical cyclone on Labor Day. It was either Danielle
Right.
or it was Earl. So what I'm
Well,
saying,
it could have been both. We had 2.
so now
Um,
what I'm
yeah.
saying, this might be one of those rare occasions this year that we might not have anything on Labor Day.
Yeah,
And
quite possible. Quite possible. All right, you know what? It's coming up on a quarter of nine, and I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
So we'll. I don't know if you have a Briller Jeopardy or if I have a Briller Jeopardy, but we'll save it for tomorrow, shall we?
surely.
Excellent. You're always so cooperative. Uh, all right. Okay. We'll be back. We've got 88 likes tonight. Thank you very much. I'm not sticking around for 100. Thanks everybody for being here. And we'll be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Night, night.
Good night, folks.